This story is titled, My Mother-in-Law Tried to Steal My Inherited House with a Fake Lawyer. She didn't know I'm a real one until it blew up in her face. Hey everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey everyone, I've been debating whether or not to share this, but I finally decided to go for it. This story is a mix of weird, frustrating, and, now that it's over, kind of funny. To start, I'm a 35-year-old guy who's been a lawyer for a little over 10 years. I don't go around broadcasting it because it's usually better to let people underestimate me. Plus, when you tell someone you're a lawyer, they either want free advice or act weird about it, so I just keep it low-key unless I have to bring it up. My wife, Stacy, and I have been married for about 6 years, and things are great between us. We're a team, which is important when you're dealing with certain family members, like her mom, Patty. Now, Patty is, let's say, intense. She's one of those people who believes she's always right, always knows best, and always has to be involved in everything. From the moment I met her, it was clear she wasn't thrilled about me. For context, Stacy grew up in a pretty tight-knit family, but Patty was the ringleader. She controlled everything, from the family vacations to who brought what to Thanksgiving dinner. She's the kind of person who has opinions about everything, and she's not shy about sharing them. When I came into the picture, I think Patty saw me as some kind of threat. I wasn't the high society doctor or businessman she probably envisioned for her daughter. I grew up middle class, worked my butt off to get through law school, and now I'm doing pretty well for myself. But Patty, she couldn't care less about my accomplishments. To her, I was the guy who was taking her daughter away. At first, I tried to keep things civil. I mean, she's my mother-in-law, and Stacy loves her, so I figured I'd just grin and bear it. But Patty made that really difficult. She had this way of making little comments that sounded innocent on the surface, but were clearly meant to dig at me. Like, at family dinners, she'd say stuff like, "Oh, you're a lawyer? My cousin's son is studying law at Harvard." Or, "It's nice that you work so hard." Stacy's ex never had to. His family has real money. Stacy, to her credit, always had my back. She'd call her mom out, but Patty would play the victim every time, saying she was just making conversation or didn't mean anything by it. Classic Patty. The real drama started when my uncle passed away 2 years ago. He left me this little beach house in his will. It's nothing fancy, just a small 2-bedroom place that's been in the family for years. The paint's peeling, the roof needs some work, and the plumbing is questionable, but it's got charm. Stacy and I fell in love with it immediately, and we decided to fix it up and use it as a weekend getaway spot. As soon as Patty heard about the beach house, she started acting weird. At first, it was just little comments like, "Oh, a beach house. That's a lot of responsibility for someone your age," or, "Are you sure you can afford to keep it up?" Stuff that was annoying but easy to brush off. But then she started showing up unannounced, claiming she was just in the area. By the way, we live about 60 miles from her, and the beach house is even farther, so her excuse didn't make any sense. One day, I caught her snooping around the house while Stacy and I were out. Our neighbor, an older guy named Frank, who's retired and keeps an eye on the area, called me to let me know he saw a woman with big hair poking around the property. Patty has hair that could survive a tornado, so I knew it was her. When I confronted her, she acted like it was no big deal. "I just wanted to make sure everything was okay," she said, like she hadn't just trespassed on my property. Things got even weirder when I started noticing small changes around the house. A chair would be moved, a window would be unlocked that I was sure I'd locked, or little items would be out of place. Stacy thought I was imagining things, but I knew something was up. One day, I came back from running errands and found a folder sitting on the kitchen table. Inside were a bunch of papers, property documents to be exact. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank, but then I saw Patty's handwriting in the margins. She'd scribbled notes like family legacy and secure ownership. That's when it clicked. Patty wasn't just being nosy. She had some kind of plan for the house. I decided to keep quiet about it for a while and just gather information. As a lawyer, I've learned that it's better to have all the facts before you confront someone. Plus, I wanted to see how far she'd go. I set up a couple of cameras around the house, not in a creepy way, just in the common areas, to catch anything suspicious. Sure enough, within a week, I had footage of Patty letting herself in with a spare key she must have copied without our knowledge. When I showed the footage to Stacy, she was livid. She confronted Patty, who denied everything at first, then shifted gears and said she was just trying to help. Stacy told her to stay away from the house, and for a while things seemed to calm down. But I should have known Patty wouldn't let it go that easily. About 6 months later, that's when things really went off the rails. Patty showed up at the beach house one sunny Saturday morning, uninvited, big shocker there, with a man she proudly introduced as my lawyer. I was mid-bagel enjoying the peace and quiet when Stacy called me out from the porch. I stepped outside, and there they were. Patty, in her signature too-tight blazer and towering hair, and this guy who looked like he'd just Googled business casual 5 minutes before leaving the house. He was holding a briefcase that might have been older than me and had this nervous look, like he wasn't entirely sure why he was there. "Good morning," Patty said brightly, as if she hadn't just barged onto private property. "We need to talk about some important family matters." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Yes," she said, sweeping past me like she owned the place. "It's about the future of this house. And by the way, you're welcome for me coming all this way to help you sort it out." Now, I'll admit, I was curious. Patty wasn't subtle, but she wasn't usually this bold either. I figured I'd let her dig her own grave before stepping in. Stacy, meanwhile, was staring at her mom like she'd just announced she was running for president. Patty gestured to the kitchen table, where she promptly sat down and opened up a manila folder. "Todd, let's get started," she said, snapping her fingers at the guy in the Halloween suit. Todd, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, fumbled with his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. I glanced at Stacy, who mouthed, "What the hell?" I shrugged. This was Patty's show, and I wasn't about to interrupt the performance. "This," Patty began, tapping the top sheet with a manicured finger, "is a transfer of ownership agreement. It's very simple. You and Stacy will sign the house over to me, and I'll ensure it remains within the family for generations to come." I stared at her, trying not to laugh. "You want us to sign the house over to you?" She said yes, as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. "It's for the best. You're young, inexperienced, and frankly, this kind of property is a lot of responsibility. It needs someone who understands its value. And that someone is you?" I asked, barely holding back a grin. "Exactly," she said, looking proud of herself. "It's not personal, dear. It's just what's best for the family." Todd, who had been shuffling papers around like a magician preparing for a card trick, finally spoke up. "If you'll just take a look here," he said, sliding a paper toward me. I picked it up and scanned it quickly. It was a joke. The wording was sloppy, half the clauses were missing, and there were typos everywhere. Everything about this lawyer screamed fake, from his nervous sweating to the way he couldn't make eye contact. I decided to have some fun, ask him some basic legal questions. Any first-year law student could answer. I watched him squirm and stumble while Patty kept trying to cut in. "Patty," I said, setting the paper down. "Did you write this yourself?" Her face flushed. "Of course not. Todd is a professional." "Right," I said, turning to Todd. "So, Todd, what law school did you go to?" He blinked. Well, I didn't exactly finish." I cut him off. "Okay, no problem. What's your bar number?" Todd started sweating. I'm not officially licensed." "Not officially licensed?" I repeated, feigning confusion. "So, you're not a lawyer?" He stammered something about being in the process, but I didn't let him finish. "Got it. Thanks, Todd." Patty jumped in, clearly irritated that her plan was unraveling. "Let's not get distracted by technicalities. The important thing is that we move forward with the transfer." "Patty," Stacy said, her voice sharp, "are you serious right now? You brought a fake lawyer to our house and expect us to just hand it over to you?" "It's not fake," Patty snapped. "Todd is perfectly capable of handling this." "Sure," I said, leaning back in my chair. "But just for fun, let's see how capable he is." I turned to Todd. "Can you explain to me the difference between a quitclaim deed and a warranty deed?" Todd froze like a deer in headlights. Patty tried to jump in, but I held up a hand. "No, let Todd answer." Todd mumbled something about legal terms and specific clauses, but didn't actually say anything coherent. I nodded like I was impressed. "Great," I said. "Now, how about you explain the implications of signing a deed transfer without title insurance?" Todd looked like he might pass out. Patty was visibly fuming. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Just sign the papers and we can sort out the details later." I stood up, walked over to my briefcase, and pulled out my own folder. "As a practicing attorney," I said, laying the folder on the table, "I have a few concerns about these documents." Patty's jaw dropped. "You're a lawyer?" "Yup," I said, popping the P for emphasis. "And these documents? They're garbage." I went through the papers one by one, pointing out every error and explaining, in excruciating detail, why they were not only invalid, but also borderline fraudulent. By the time I was done, Todd was visibly shaking, and Patty was staring daggers at me. "You've made your point," she said through gritted teeth. "Oh, I'm not done," I said, pulling out my laptop. "You've been poking around the property records, haven't you? Did you think I wouldn't notice the unauthorized inquiries?" Patty's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't," I said, opening up an email on my screen. "This is from the county clerk. It shows that someone made multiple inquiries into the title history of this property using your email address. Care to explain?" Patty stood up abruptly, knocking her chair over. "I was just looking out for the family," she shouted. "By trying to steal our house?" Stacy shot back. "This is insane, Mom. You need to leave." Patty glared at us, then turned to Todd. "We're leaving." Todd didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his briefcase and practically sprinted out the door. Patty followed, but not before throwing one last line over her shoulder. "You'll regret this." Once they were gone, Stacy and I just sat there in stunned silence for a moment. "Well," she said finally, "that was something I'll be filing away for future reference." I said, and that's how Patty's first big plan completely fell apart. I didn't know it at the time, but this was only the beginning of her antics. After Patty's grand transfer the house to me scheme fell apart, she decided to go into full-blown damage control mode. And when I say damage control, I mean she started dialing up family members like she was campaigning for office. Apparently, Patty's version of events went something like this. I was an evil, controlling husband who was tearing the family apart, brainwashing Stacy, and forcing her to cut ties with her loving mother. According to Patty, I was practically twisting my villainous lawyer mustache while plotting to destroy everything she held dear. Now, Stacy's family is pretty tight-knit, but they're also not stupid. Most of them know Patty's flair for drama and her habit of bending the truth like it's a yoga pose. Still, a few relatives called me up, curious about what was really going on. After I explained the whole situation, most people just laughed and told me not to worry. Apparently, Patty had been pulling stunts like this for years, though maybe not on this scale. Her reputation for creative truth-telling, as one cousin put it, had already earned her a fair share of skeptics in the family. But not everyone brushed it off so easily. A couple of her die-hard supporters, like her sister Beverly, who's basically Patty's clone, weren't so quick to believe me. Beverly called Stacy, and let me tell you, that was a fun conversation to overhear. "Stacy, I just don't understand why you're letting your husband come between you and your mother," Beverly said, in that holier-than-thou tone that runs in their family. "My husband isn't the problem, Beverly," Stacy shot back. "Mom is the one who tried to steal our house." "Well, that's not what she told me," Beverly said, like she was some kind of detective uncovering the truth. "Of course it's not," Stacy replied, "because if she told you the real story, you'd see how ridiculous she's being." Beverly tried to argue, but Stacy shut her down. "Look, you can believe whatever you want, but I was there. I saw what she did. End of discussion." Stacy hung up, and I swear I could see the steam coming out of her ears. "I don't know why I even bother with her," she muttered. Meanwhile, Patty wasn't just working the phones. She was also working herself into a frenzy. She started showing up at family events with this air of martyrdom, dropping little comments about how she wasn't sure she'd ever see her daughter again, or how some people don't appreciate family anymore. It was peak passive-aggressive Patty, and honestly, it was almost impressive how far she could take it. But things upgraded into a new level when Patty's antics spilled over into her professional life. Apparently, she'd been using company resources to dig up information about the beach house. She must have thought no one would notice, but of course someone did. One day, Stacy got a call from one of her cousins who works in HR. Small world, right? "Did you hear about Patty?" the cousin asked. "What about her?" Stacy replied. "She got fired. Apparently she was using her work email to look up property records and send messages about, something shady." Stacy put the phone on speaker so I could hear, and we both just stared at each other in disbelief. Patty got herself fired trying to dig up dirt on us. It didn't take long for the rest of the family to find out, and let's just say Patty's reputation took another hit. A few people who had been on the fence started calling us to apologize for doubting our side of the story. "I can't believe she went that far," one of Stacy's cousins said. "She always seemed pushy, but this is next level." "Yeah," I said. "Welcome to the club." With her job gone and her family starting to distance themselves, Patty's social calendar started looking pretty empty. But if you think that slowed her down, you don't know Patty. A week after she got fired, we started getting weird messages from mutual acquaintances. Stuff like, "Patty says she's really worried about you guys," or "Patty mentioned you might be struggling financially. Do you need any help?" It didn't take a genius to figure out what she was doing. She was trying to plant the idea that Stacy and I couldn't handle the beach house. I guess in her mind, if enough people believed we were incapable, she'd swoop in as the hero to save the day. I considered confronting her, but Stacy convinced me to let it go. She's digging her own grave, Stacy said. Let her keep talking. It just makes her look worse. And she was right. The more Patty talked, the more people started to see through her. Even her diehard supporters like Beverly were starting to get tired of the drama. But just when we thought things were finally settling down, Patty pulled her boldest move yet. About a month later, we got a notice in the mail. It was from a lawyer, an actual licensed one this time, informing us that Patty was suing us. When I opened the letter and read the details, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Patty was claiming that she had financially contributed to the repairs and upkeep of the beach house, and therefore had a valid stake in it. Never mind the fact that the house had been left to Stacy and me outright in my uncle's will. I sat there in stunned silence for a moment before bursting out laughing. "She's suing us," I said, waving the letter at Stacy. "For what?" she asked, grabbing the paper. "Apparently she thinks she owns part of the house now," I said, still laughing. "Because, all those non-existent financial contributions she made." And just like that, we were back in the thick of it. After we got the notice, I started gathering everything. Bank statements, receipts, contracts with repair companies, and even emails related to the estate. I wasn't about to let her muddy the waters with vague claims and manipulative theatrics. Stacy, understandably, was livid. She didn't pay for a single thing. How does she think she's going to prove this? She's banking on us not being able to prove it either, I said. But we can, and we will. Her whole case is smoke and mirrors. What do we do now? Stacy asked. We show up to court, and we let her dig her own hole, I replied. When the court date finally arrived, we walked into the courtroom prepared for anything. Patty, of course, was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer. Unlike the fake lawyer Todd, this one at least looked professional, though he didn't seem particularly enthusiastic about the case. Patty, on the other hand, was in her element. She was dressed in her signature over-the-top style and had this smug expression, like she'd already won. We sat down, and the judge entered, an older woman who radiated authority. She got straight to business, asking Patty's lawyer to present their case. Patty's lawyer stood up and began what was clearly a rehearsed speech. He started by praising Patty's character, describing her as a dedicated and loving mother who only wanted to preserve the family's legacy. Then he moved on to her claims, stating that Patty had personally invested significant funds into the repair and maintenance of the beach house to ensure it remained in good condition. She has receipts, I whispered to Stacy, raising an eyebrow. She has nerve, Stacy muttered back. Patty's lawyer continued, explaining that while the house was indeed inherited, Patty's alleged financial contributions created an implied interest in the property. She acted in good faith to protect and preserve the family's asset, he concluded. When it was my turn, I decided to keep it short and sweet. Your Honor, the plaintiff's claims are entirely unfounded. The house was left to my wife and me as part of my uncle's will. It is our property, and there was never any agreement, verbal or otherwise, for shared ownership. The plaintiff has no documentation to support her claims, because they are simply not true. The judge nodded and motioned for Patty to take the stand. Patty walked up like she was about to deliver the performance of her life. Mrs. Patty, her lawyer began, can you explain your involvement with the repairs and maintenance of the beach house? Of course, she said, clasping her hands together. When I heard about the house being left to my daughter and son-in-law, I was so happy for them. But the house needed a lot of work, and they were overwhelmed. So I stepped in to help. And how did you help? The lawyer asked. I paid for several repairs, Patty said confidently. Plumbing, roof work, even some landscaping. I didn't keep track of every little thing because, well, they're family. I just wanted to make sure the house was livable. I watched her with a neutral expression, but inside I was shaking my head. Patty's ability to spin a story was almost impressive. Her lawyer pressed on. So, you contributed financially to the upkeep of the house? She said yes. I even offered to oversee some of the work myself. Did the defendants acknowledge these contributions? It was understood, she said, using her favorite vague excuse. When it was my turn to cross-examine, I walked up to the stand with my stack of documents. Mrs. Patty, I began, you claim to have contributed financially to the repairs of the beach house? Can you specify the amounts and dates of these payments? She hesitated. Well, I didn't keep an exact record, but it was thousands of dollars over several months. Thousands of dollars, I repeated. And how were these payments made? Check? Cash? Directly to the contractors? Mostly cash, she said, shifting in her seat. Cash, I said, letting the word hang in the air. And you don't have a single receipt, invoice, or bank statement to corroborate these contributions? She hesitated. It was informal. Family doesn't always keep track of these things. Interesting, I said, turning to the judge. Because I have here a complete record of all payments made for the repair and maintenance of the beach house. Every single one was made from our joint account, and I have the receipts and contractor invoices to prove it. I handed the documents to the judge, who began flipping through them. Mrs. Patty, I continued, you also mentioned offering to oversee some of the work yourself. Can you tell us which contractors you worked with? She paused, clearly scrambling for an answer. It wasn't a formal arrangement, she said finally. That's convenient, I replied. Because according to these emails from the contractors, every interaction regarding the repairs was handled by me or my wife. Your name doesn't appear anywhere. The judge looked up from the documents, her expression unreadable. Mrs. Patty, do you have any evidence to support your claims? Patty stammered. I told you, I didn't keep records. I wasn't expecting to need them. I stepped back to my table and pulled out one last piece of evidence. Your Honor, I'd also like to submit a copy of the will, which clearly states that the house was left solely to my wife and me. There is no mention of shared ownership or any financial obligations. The judge took the document and glanced at it briefly. Then she turned back to Patty. Mrs. Patty, she said, her tone firm, this case relies entirely on your assertion that you contributed financially to the property, yet you have provided no evidence to support this claim. Meanwhile, the defendants have provided ample documentation to refute it. Do you have anything else to add? She didn't have anything to say. For the first time, she seemed to realize just how bad this was going for her. The judge dismissed the case shortly after that, ruling entirely in our favor. But before the gavel fell, she added a pointed remark. Mrs. Patty, I strongly advise you to think carefully before pursuing legal action in the future, without evidence to support your claims. Court resources are not here for baseless disputes. As Stacy and I walked out of the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction. Patty had tried her best to undermine us, but the truth had prevailed. Of course, knowing Patty, I doubted this was the end of her meddling. And well, I was right. After losing in court so decisively, you'd think she'd take a moment to reflect, maybe reconsider her life choices. But no, Patty doubled down in the only way she knew how, by trying to spin the narrative in her favor. The first ripple of fallout came almost immediately. Patty's failed lawsuit became the family's new favorite topic of discussion. Word spread quickly, and within days, I started getting calls and texts from relatives. Most of them wanted the juicy details, but some were genuinely shocked by the lengths Patty had gone to. My favorite call came from Stacy's cousin Brenda, who always had a knack for delivering brutal honesty. She really thought she was going to win, huh? Brenda said, laughing. I mean, I knew Aunt Patty was bold, but this is a whole new level. Honestly, I don't even know why she thought anyone would believe her. She's been pulling this kind of crap for years, Brenda added. That sentiment became a common theme in the family. People started sharing stories about times when Patty had manipulated, lied, or otherwise inserted herself into situations where she didn't belong. It was like her courtroom flop had opened the floodgates, and everyone was finally ready to air their grievances. Apparently, years ago, she had tried to get control over her sister's finances by claiming her sister was too stressed to handle money. Another time, she had convinced a cousin to hand over a family heirloom because it would be safer with her. And the heirloom mysteriously disappeared after that. Stacy and I mostly stayed out of the gossip, but it was hard not to feel a little vindicated. Patty's carefully crafted image as the family matriarch was crumbling, and it wasn't because of anything we did. She had dug this hole all on her own. But while the family was turning against her, Patty wasn't about to let go of her grudge. She started sending Stacy these long, guilt-trippy texts about how the court case had hurt her deeply and how she couldn't believe her own daughter would betray her like that. She's acting like we dragged her to court, Stacy said, rolling her eyes as she read the latest message. Typical Patty, I said. She's not sorry for what she did. She's just sorry it didn't work. Stacy ended up blocking her number for a while, which only escalated things further. Patty took to social media, posting vague, passive-aggressive statuses about being abandoned by those you love most. I give it 2 days before she's on Facebook Live, crying in front of a bunch of ceramic angels, I joked. It was funny at first, but then Patty started trying to recruit allies. She called up anyone who would listen, spinning a sob story about how Stacy and I had turned on her and how all she wanted was to keep the family together. One of the first people she called was her sister Beverly, who had always been one of Patty's staunchest supporters. But even Beverly seemed to have her limits. She called me crying, Beverly told Stacy during a phone call. But honestly, I didn't know what to say. I mean, you're my niece, and what she did? It was wrong. I can't defend her this time. Hearing that from Beverly was a big deal. If Patty was losing her, she was losing her biggest cheerleader. Despite the backlash, Patty wasn't ready to go quietly. Her next move was to try to appeal to the family matriarch, Stacy's grandma, who had always been a neutral party in family disputes. Patty drove out to see her, unannounced as usual, and spent 2 hours crying about how she'd been wronged. To her credit, Grandma didn't buy into it. According to Stacy's cousin Brenda, who heard the story later, Grandma told Patty in no uncertain terms that she needed to stop causing drama and take responsibility for her actions. She said that? Stacy asked when Brenda relayed the story. Yup. Apparently, Grandma told her, I love you, but this is your mess, and you need to clean it up. Patty, of course, left in a huff, but the damage was done. She'd alienated almost everyone in the family, and no amount of crocodile tears could fix that. Meanwhile, Stacy and I felt free. The beach house was finally ours, the lawsuit was behind us, and Patty had gone quiet. For a little while anyway. But in the back of my mind, I knew it was only a matter of time before she pulled another stunt. Stacy and I talked a lot about what our future with Patty would look like. I was ready to cut ties completely. After everything she'd done, I couldn't see a path forward. But Stacy wasn't there yet. She's still my mom, she said one night as we sat on the porch. I know she's toxic, and I know she's done awful things, but it's hard to let go completely. What if she really does change? I didn't want to push her, but I also knew that holding on to hope with someone like Patty could be dangerous. I get it, I said carefully. But you've seen what she's capable of. This isn't just a bad habit or a personality quirk. She's deliberately tried to hurt us. That's not something you can just forgive and forget. Stacy sighed. I know. I don't know if I'm ready to walk away completely. So we compromised. Stacy kept minimal contact with Patty, an occasional text or a quick phone call, but we set firm boundaries. No unannounced visits, no discussions about the house, and no manipulation. For a while, it seemed to work. Patty stayed relatively quiet, only reaching out to Stacy with surface-level conversations. I could tell it was hard for Stacy to keep her distance, but she was holding firm, and I respected her for it. Then Patty did what classic her does best. She crossed the line. It started innocently enough. Stacy got a call from a cousin who mentioned that Patty had been talking about the beach house again. She said something about how it should have stayed in the family, the cousin said. I didn't think much of it, but I figured you'd want to know. Stacy brushed it off, thinking it was just Patty venting. But I could see the worry creeping in. What if she's planning something? She asked me. She wouldn't be that stupid, I said. Not after what happened in court. She knows she can't win. But I underestimated just how far Patty was willing to go. One weekend, Stacy and I drove out to the beach house to spend a couple of days relaxing. As we pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The front door was slightly ajar, and there was a box sitting on the porch. What the hell? Stacy said, getting out of the car. We walked up to the door cautiously. I pushed it open and my stomach dropped. The living room was a mess. Furniture had been moved, drawers were open, and there was a stack of papers on the coffee table. On top of the pile was a note in Patty's unmistakable handwriting. It read, I'm sorry, but I had to step in. This house is too important to let you ruin it. You'll understand someday. Stacy stood frozen, staring at the note. She was here, she said, her voice shaking. I picked up the papers and started flipping through them. They were estimates for repairs and renovations, new flooring, updated appliances, landscaping. It was like Patty had come in and started planning a full remodel without telling us. She broke in, I said, anger rising in my chest. She let herself into our house and decided she was in charge. Stacy sat down on the couch, her face pale. I can't believe this, she whispered. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security camera app. Sure enough, there she was. Patty, walking into the house with a clipboard and a tape measure like she was auditioning for HGTV. She had spent hours in the house, going through our things and making notes. Stacy watched the footage with me, her expression hardening with every passing second. By the time we got to the end, she was furious. She didn't just cross the line, Stacy said quietly. She obliterated it. I nodded. This is who she is, Stacy. She's not going to change. She's always going to feel entitled to control your life. Stacy was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked at me and said, You know what? I'm done. I can't do this anymore. That night, Stacy called Patty and confronted her. I can't believe you would do this, she said. You broke into our house. You went through our things. How could you think that's okay? Patty tried to play the victim, as always. I was just trying to help, she said. You've been ignoring me, and I thought this would show you how much I care. This isn't love, Mom, Stacy said firmly. This is control, and I'm done letting you manipulate me. Patty started to cry, but Stacy didn't waver. I don't want to hear from you anymore, she said. Not until you've actually changed, and I mean really changed. I'm blocking your number, and I don't want you coming near us or the house again. Patty tried to argue, but Stacy hung up. Then she blocked her number and deleted her from all her social media accounts. It wasn't an easy decision for Stacy, but it was the right one. Patty had crossed so many lines that there was no coming back from it. In the days that followed, Stacy and I both felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Cutting ties with Patty wasn't something Stacy had ever wanted to do, but it had become clear that there was no other option. This isn't just about us anymore, Stacy said one evening as we sat on the porch. It's about protecting our future, our peace. She doesn't get to take that from us. The beach house, once a symbol of Patty's interference, was now a sanctuary, a place where we could finally move forward without looking back. And that, more than anything, was worth every battle we'd fought.